You may be seated. I have some questions that I'm going to be reading to you. After I read a question, I will tell you that you can answer the question. You can then face the jurors, answer the question. After you're through answering the question, if you would look back to me as you're doing right now, I'll take that as a signal that you're finished with your answer. I'll then go on to the next question. After the last question, I'll see if the attorneys have any follow-up questions for you.
Okay.
If you would like me to read a question again, just let me know. I'll be happy to do that. All right. The first question reads, are the other agencies who are audited and considered for accreditation only other law enforcement entities? You may answer the question.
Our accrediting body, ANAB, accredits forensic laboratories. Some of those forensic laboratories may be part of a law enforcement agency. Some might be private vendor labs. Some might be independent forensic labs.
The next question reads, are your deliveries addressed or received in a different fashion? For example, other departments, for example, HPD, administration, procurement department, etc. Please elaborate process.
FedEx delivers packages throughout our department, and the way they come to each specific department is there is a division listed on the FedEx. For example, in the crime lab, it would be addressed to the scientific investigation section. Throughout our department, there is the finance division, there might be patrol divisions, and so the FedEx will just drop off packages in one location for each division.
The next question reads, what percentage or weight of HPD's forensic labs, procedural handling policies and practices play in receiving the accreditation you spoke of during your testimony? You may answer the question.
I think it would be hard to assign a specific percentage. The accrediting body looks at about, I would say, 300 standards. Of those 300 standards, because evidence handling is important, there might be about there's probably about a dozen standards that are applied to evidence handling, assigning unique identifiers to evidence, chain of custody. I guess that would be my best estimate.
The next question reads, has the HPD ever experienced less than acceptable rating when being audited for accreditation? You may answer the question.
We've always passed our accreditation audits, and we've never had a disruption of our accreditation.
The next question reads, do visitors or other law enforcement agencies working with HPD have to be escorted or receive any type of background or clearance for entry and or communicating or personally transferring item of evidentiary matter? You may answer the question.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
Do visitors or other law enforcement agencies working with HPD have to be escorted or receive any type of background or clearance for entry and or communicating or personally transferring item of evidentiary matter? You may answer the question.
The scientific investigation section is located in the main police station of the Honolulu Police Department. Visitors do check in at a main entry. Typically, law enforcement officers from another agency, if they know where they're going, would not be escorted. They would come to our main reception area to identify themselves, but there would be no background or clearance type checks.
just for clarification, when you say main entry, are you referring to the police department's main entry or the SIS main entry?
They would check in at the Honolulu Police Department's main entry. So to enter the building itself, they would check in with our police staff. And then once they identify themselves, they will be either instructed where to go, or they may be escorted if they're not familiar with the building.
And then once they reach your section, I think in the event the question is asking for that, what is the process at that point?
So we do have a receptionist who sits in our reception area. A visitor would come and check in with them to identify themselves and what they are, what kind of business they are conducting with the section.
All right, the next question reads, do visitors to lab wear any type of badging reflecting who that individual or department in which he/she is associated with? You may answer the question.
No, they wouldn't necessarily have to be showing their badge or their ID when they come to visit the section.
The last question reads, do outside visitors have to sign in and sign out when accessing areas beyond HPD reception area? You may answer the question.
If visitors are allowed past our reception area, we have designated certain portions of the scientific investigation section as controlled versus non-controlled. All of the laboratories and the evidence vaults within those laboratories are considered controlled, and there would be signing in. We have sign-in sheets on the doors. If they're just in, say, the general office area, the conference rooms, there would not be a sign-in.
Any follow-up questions, Ms. Jones?
Briefly, yes. In regards to that last answer about the controlled versus non-controlled areas of the forensic laboratory, why do you have the division of controlled versus non-controlled?
The controlled areas are the areas in which evidence would be open and analysts would be actively working. So we do want to minimize the number of visitors in those areas. Visitors in those areas would have to be there for a reason. The rest of the SIS, the Scientific Investigation section, is designed for tours to come through. So those corridors are considered uncontrolled.
What about the lab? You talked about the labs and the vaults as part of those controlled areas. Can anyone get into the labs?
All of the laboratories and the vaults within are controlled with electronic keys, and those keys are assigned to each individual who has authorized access to those particular rooms.
Can you view inside the lab, standing outside the lab?
Yes, from the hallways that are not controlled, there are windows. Like I said, it was designed for tours so that visitors can look into the labs from those windows.
And what about the vaults? Can you see the vaults from the uncontrolled hallways?
You might be able to see the vaults through the windows, probably just depends what angle you're looking at.
And you said, if allowed, when you're answering about the sign-in and the sign-out, you qualified your answer by beginning, if allowed beyond reception. Will you explain what allows a person beyond reception?
The scientific investigation section is also controlled by electronic key. So if the receptionist has to allow somebody to come in, they would actually have to physically open the door for that individual to enter the reception and office areas.
And and then you talked about people or the public accessing by tours. How do you control the movement of a tour group within your laboratory area? Not actually the lab, but within the forensic laboratory section.
There are police officers that are assigned to give tours. They will escort a tour group through, and the receptionist will allow the police officer to come with the tour, and they'll escort the tour as they go through our section.
Mr. Uppo.
Relative to these last answers, as well as your answer to the questions about the accreditation and quality assurance standards, wouldn't it, well, isn't it accurate that in 2014, you, or, actually, let me step up, that the SIS division of the Honolulu Police Department, for which you are a supervisor, was audited by the Office of the Inspector General for the United States?
Objection, hearsay.
The
This
objection
is not
is,
for the, it's not for the truth of the matter, sir. Those
Objection,
stores
Your
were-
Honor.
They were audited,
And
and
hearsay.
it's an answer to the substance of the question.
Your Honor, counsel's testifying.
About what the
wait, I
offer?
want to have an exchange. Let me just, take a look at the questions and I'll see if it falls within the scope of those questions. All right, the objection is sustained.
In terms of your answers to questions relative to access in the laboratory areas, isn't it true that in 2014, your laboratory was observed not to fully meet quality
Objection, Your Honor.
assurance standards
Same
because it did
basis.
not
Hearsay.
adequately safeguard
Move to
access
strike.
to the laboratory and
Your Honor,
evidence storage
this
area?
lacks a good faith basis, and counsel is putting facts before the jury improperly.
Mr. Alpo, that's inappropriate. Outside of the scope of the questions asked, your statements are not evidence.
Sir, may we approach?
No, you may not. The objection is sustained.
Your Honor,
And
will-
the question is not evidence, and the court will order it stricken.
thank you.
You were asked by the jury essentially whether your laboratory has ever essentially been criticized relative to the accreditation.
That was not the question.
Objection, Your Honor.
That
Counsel
was not the
persists
question.
in a line of questioning this court has indicated is not proper. It lacks a good faith
I'm
basis,
not
and
laying
at
a
this point will
foundation.
ask he be admonished.
That was
Yeah,
not,
I mean, we approach, I mean, this
No.
isn't happening again.
because of what you're doing, Mr. Alpo. I'm telling you now that I've already ruled. That was not the question that was asked.
That's why I'm clarifying whether
No, you're not
we're on the topic
clarifying.
or not.
You're not doing that, Mr. Alpo.
Well, let me ask you, what question were you asked that you provided an answer?
I'll
relative-
provide you with the question,
Okay.
just so that you can, so that we can put that to rest. The question was, has the HPD ever experienced less than acceptable grading when being audited for accreditation? Your question falls outside of the scope of
This
that.
goes towards the question of
No.
access into the laboratory.
Then ask questions related to that, Mr. Alpo, and don't attempt to insert information that will take us off into a tangent that is going to consume a tremendous amount of time and falls outside of the scope of the questions being asked.
Well,
You could,
relative to this issue about access to the laboratory areas, you'd agree with me that SIS has been criticized by the federal government relative.
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel again persists for now the third time in exploring an area this court has ruled is improper, and after he's been admonished by this court.
Mr. Alpo,
Yes,
are you
sanctions
prepared
at
to
this
bring in
point.
somebody from the federal government and we're going to conduct a public hearing on the lab?
I would think that if she's.
Is that what we're going to do?
I think she
No,
knows.
I'm
that
asking you that question.
Your Honor, if we may approach,
No.
I'm happy to engage in this conversation,
No,
but it's
no,
getting
I-
argumentative in front of the jury.
I see this taking up a tremendous amount of time, and I don't think you have any witnesses lined up for this.
I can refresh your recollection regarding the report. She was, as the
Your Honor.
All
supervisor.
right, Mr.
Again,
Upwell.
counsel is testifying to facts not properly before this jury, and we ask that he be admonished, or at this point sanctioned.
Your Honor,
You know, Mr. Upwell, you and the government, for some 2.5 years have told me about the witnesses will be testifying, the scope of the testimony, and this is going to add not only a new chapter but several volumes to what you're attempting to present. Let's move on.
with all due respect,
Mr. Upwell, let's move on.
but Your Honor, she testified to something. How can I not cross-examine her about
You can
it?
cross-examine her about what you're trying to insert other things that, for which there's been absolutely no notice provided.
May I approach and put something on the record in terms of an offer
You may
of
do
proof?
that at a later time.
But by that time, it'll deprive me of the opportunity to ask her the question, Your Honor.
I'll allow you to do it before we begin this afternoon.
Has your office ever been to your knowledge, as
Objection, Your Honor, that's the same question.
Yeah, Mr. Upwell, the questions related to the procedures that they follow with respect to access. If you want to ask follow-up questions, that's fine.
I have no questions for this witness then.
All right. All right.
Shall I call Ms. Leon for 4 minutes?
We've got 3
And
minutes
maybe
left.
approach so I can make the record before she leaves then?
I'm going to excuse the jurors for lunch. And, all right, so, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our lunch recess at this time and we'll reconvene at 1:30. Thank you so much. And then, counsel may approach.